Good afternoon. This is Muslim Network TV, and this is your host of Critical Talk, Professor Amina Al-Din. And today I'm going to talk with Ruby Khan and Andy Reid, who are sitting over there across a very large pond in the UK, about I really want to get away from what's happening in the U.S., but the two countries so mirror each other, even in our leaders' hairstyles, that it's difficult to break them apart. And one of the major topics I want to look at is Brexit. We have been trying to follow it, and I have to admit, the more I follow, the more I get confused and lose my way. I probably am unclear about how the European Union functions. Maybe then I would kind of understand what Brexit is doing. I also want to know what happened with Black Lives Matter across the pond, how people over there are viewing our forever election here. So with me today, I have Ruby Khan, who is an international development professional with a master's degree from Johns Hopkins here in the U.S. and 15 years experience. She most recently worked with the UN in Somalia and Pakistan, in Paris with the OECD, and now works for an international NGO in London. Her expertise is in the areas of food security, livelihoods, and social protection. Andy Reid is a fisherman. I just love this term because they had something on the other day about fishermen from England, who, as Assistant Chief Executive of the National Fisheries Federation, represented the fishing industry at national and international level, working closely with politicians on a bipartisan basis. But I know that Andy, and last time we had both of these wonderful people who are up late at night to spend some time with us he was on his way to Liberia. So I got to just get a little bit in about Liberia, but I want to welcome both of them to the show. And the first thing I'm going to ask is that we all get our heads at the same level. See, Andy had gotten too comfortable back there, so we're going to make him a little uncomfortable. So my very first question is, what is the European Union? I guess that's where I want to start. What is it?
That's a difficult question in many respects because it means different things to almost everybody in the union.
It means different things to everybody in it.
For Margaret Thatcher, it was a trading relationship.
Okay.
For the French and the Germans at the end of the Second World War, it was a means to stop any wars happening in future.
Between
and to bind them ever closer together. Legally, it's a union of sovereign states that agree a common set of rules, not just for trading, but anything related to trading. So, for instance, human rights or workers' rights or environmental concerns are fundamental, because if you break those rules, you can sell cheaper products within a single market.
Mm-hmm.
So it's anything that affects the single market and the movement of goods and people within the union. The EU Commission, which is the civil service, would say it comes under their jurisdiction. And it's that free movement which the UK sees as a loss of sovereignty, which has been the fundamental driver of Brexit. Now, I wait for Ruby to correct me on any of that.
No, I would just add that probably the closest thing we have in North America is NAFTA, which is a free movement of goods. and it was supposed to be people, but doesn't really happen as much. But there definitely is it's a trading block, a
So,
way
for
to.
this free movement of people and goods, the UK has decided it no longer wants the free movement of people and goods, except as it can make what treaties with various states.
The European Union would treat themselves in terms of trade as a single entity. So they won't be divided and conquered in that way. They're negotiating a single set of rules because of their own internal lack of borders. If it enters one country, it enters any other country in the European Union.
But
So
Brexit means that the UK wants to say bye bye.
well, the term used by the European Commission was it wants its cake and eat it. We would like the good things from the European Union without the bad things. And good is, in terms of the Brexit mantra, being able to sell everything to Europe. Bad is, but we can still stop you coming into our country, and we can still do our own thing and not follow your rules. And this is where we have the impasse. Where the cliche is we want our EU cake and we want to eat it.
Wow. So Britain is just being Britain, huh? It's back to its old imperialist ways. You know, it can't give it up and play like a good team member.
Well, that's a very good way of putting it. We don't want to be in the team, but we want the benefit of winning still. But we don't want to play with the team to be able to win.
Yeah. So, what does the everyday person in the UK think of all of this? Because if I remember, and my memory is like a sieve, but if I remember, there were people in favor and people opposed. And your current prime minister got in because no. There was this lady before him who was promising she was going to push something through. I forget her name. And she didn't get it done, and people wanted her gone. And then you brought in the orange haired dude, and now he's promising to get it done.
That's about right. And the orange-haired dude is promising a much more extreme version, where he's waving the flag and he's going to make the country great. He filled a vacuum because the lady whose name you forget, who's largely forgettable, didn't go down the bipartisan route. She played party politics, and if she'd gone down the bipartisan route and ignored her own party, she would have had probably 60 or 70% of the legislators certainly behind her. But she played party politics and couldn't control her own party. And what happens when there's a vacuum? You get a charismatic, strong, I can fix everything, blonde-headed leader promising the world and delivering nothing. And we followed your lead on that, and that's exactly what we got.
Yeah, but you didn't follow. I mean, I wish we had followed your lead on when you're out, you're out. You get your suitcases, you pack up, you close the door, and it's bye bye. We have such a drawn out process. I'm trying to think, I can think of a gazillion things that Trump is going to do to that White House before he leaves. But that's a different issue. We have to fumigate it and move on. Um, what does I mean, how is all of this negotiating, the back and forth, the give and take, what effect is it having, Ruby, on the everyday person? Do you all feel it at all?
I think it's really added to the anxiety. I mean, on top of the pandemic, it's really added to the anxiety of all of just everyday living, not knowing if I mean, after all, the United Kingdom is an island, so everything has to come. I mean, many things have to come to the island. So I think people, they do different things like panic buying, and they're not sure of their jobs already. Corporations have closed down and moved to Europe or Asia. There have been just a phenomenal number of corporate private sector firms that have closed. So overall, I think it's just leading to a lot more uncertainty than anything else.
So I don't have a real picture. They haven't shown us much over here. Um, I remember when you had the first kind of round of quarantining. Are people there still quarantining?
Yes, they are. We have something that's called a tier system. So we have 3 tiers. The first tier is for where the numbers are not so high, and it's basically like a very limited lockdown. The second
Oh,
tier
that's in
is
regions of the country, right?
yes,
Okay,
regions of the
okay.
country. Yeah, so urban areas, rural areas, but basically like partially it's like counties, things like that. So basically, the second tier is kind of a limited movement and limited transactions, and the third tier is almost a complete lockdown, except for supermarkets and pharmacies and hospitals and
So
things.
what is
So
London?
London is about to go to tier 3 if it already has not. I believe it's already, they have very high numbers, but because it's the capital, they've kind of let it operate in tier 2. But I think it's just recently moved to tier 3 now. So basically, almost from full lockdown.
So here, I mean, I'm sure that you all get news about here. People are going crazy. Um, you have a whole bunch of Trump refusing to wear masks. They want to beat up people who have on masks, saying that that's a threat to them and their freedom. I'm not quite sure the logic behind that. The hospitals are filling up so quickly that people are now beginning to be turned away. There are very few places that have elective surgeries, for example, because all the beds and the spaces are being taken up by the COVID folk. We just got, I think you all got yours a week ahead of us, vaccines, which are being given. I don't think the way the news media did, again, the news media so failed the country. Um, People thought, oh, I'm going to be able to get a vaccine tomorrow, not really realizing that there were some people more important than them, like first responders in the hospital working with people with COVID. Um, is the news of a vaccine got people crashing the gates there?
No, I think there's a very clear system for administering the vaccine. The first people will be care home residents, mostly who are over 80 years old, and their carers and health workers. And then there's a progressive system of 7 tiers, depending on your age and your vulnerability, down from that. And there's no real debate or discussion about it. Those tiers will be followed. And when it's your turn, you'll go in, but there's no discussion about jumping queues or um, uh, advancing to a different tier.
You have to remember that there's basically universal healthcare in Britain, so it's a bit less chaotic than the U.S. because U.S. is a mix of public and private. Although there are private hospitals and things, but there's not the confusion with different levels of insurance and things like that. So I think the messaging, and also because the UK is a smaller population, I think the messaging is a bit clearer about the vaccines and the dissemination of the vaccines and the sequencing of who will get vaccinated.
Well, I'm going to come back. I got a lot of things to talk about. This is Muslim Network TV. This is Critical Talk. And I, Professor Amin Al-Din, am having a wonderful conversation with Ruby Khan and Andy Reid over what is going on in the UK. We'll be right back. And I am talking about what's going on in the UK with Ruby Khan and Andy Reid. And I want to, well, there are several things that I had in my mind I wanted to talk. Do you think it is because there is a smaller population, because there is universal health? And by the way, let me back you up. People in the United States only know bills and more bills and bills and more bills. What is universal health care? What does it look like?
It's easiest for Ruby to answer that, having arrived in the US and now receiving universal health care, so she can compare the differences. I've been blessed with it since birth.
Typical Brit.
Well,
Go ahead.
well, basically, there's one kind of system to sign up. You prove your residence in a certain place, and the local council will take your name. You pick basically a surgery or a clinic that you want to go to. You sign up. There's one national form that everybody fills in. You give your proof of residence, and then within a few days, they register you, and then you're able to get a GP appointment, which is a general physician, and then referrals to specialists, and then also the biggest thing is the prescriptions are at a substantially reduced price or almost nothing. So no matter what kind of treatment you're going through, you have very minimal costs. So it's quite incredible after being through the American system. And, because a lot of it obviously is linked to employer insurance and things like that. This way, it's just very straightforward, very easy to sign up for it.
Because, with COVID, remarkably, many people went to the hospital with COVID. They didn't know that there were either reduced rates or you didn't have to pay if you went into the hospital with COVID. So they began paying these enormous, sometimes over $1 million, hospital bills, selling their homes, doing all kinds of stuff, trying to pay hospital bills, only to find out if you survived and came out, you still have years of therapy to look forward to. That you also got to find a way to, to figure out what am I going to do. And people, because they also lost their jobs, and their health care largely was tied to the job. It's been a mess. It's probably going to be a mess for the next decade if people don't take up to tents on the streets because they're losing their homes left and right. Did the UK have a moratorium on paying mortgages and rents?
There was a no, but you could elect to postpone your mortgage payments, and that was put into law. And it was also illegal to be evicted. I mean, it still is until the end. I think December the 31st for rent arrears.
But
So all the evictions were stopped, but you still owe the money. You still owe the money, but you haven't got to pay it
right,
now.
right. But what happens to the landlord? The landlord has bills.
And the landlords have been squealing. So
Yeah,
it's difficult. And
yeah,
it's okay for a big commercial landlord. For the smaller landlords, some of them have suffered.
yeah. So it's kind of the same thing.
Um,
Uh,
it,
I'm just wondering how different places are handling the crisis. As you know, here, did people get stimulus packages there?
I think that basically, there was a furlough package that the government had offered, which was 80% for the first phase, and then 20%. So 80% was of the of workers' budgets. Those that were affected by the pandemic was paid by the government in order to keep people employed. And then 20% the employers matched. I mean, it's there are so many different combinations of how people suffered, whether not having childcare or losing their jobs if you're working in the restaurant industry. So I think that they did their best to kind of cover those that were working, and then obviously there were other benefits for people that were the regular benefits of Social Security for disabled and pensioners and things like that. It's markedly different from the way that the U.S. approached it, which was I think basically cutting a check, which in some ways could be better if people are also not working. So it just depends, I think, on how you view it.
Yeah,
and
but that
if
check was gobbled up in no time. Go ahead, Stan.
Yes.
Sorry, and if I can slightly disagree with Ruby on one element, if you were working in a good job and you were furloughed, it's a good scheme. The most difficult aspect, and I think this mirrors what's happening in the state, is the working poor who are in a job that is insecure. They
Right.
get £96 a week statutory sick pay when they'd be earning 200 or £250 in a slaughterhouse, in a food preparation place, in a gig economy.
So
And
okay,
those people couldn't afford to take the £96, and they carried on working when they were sick
can you
because they
translate
couldn't afford it.
pounds into dollars, please, sir?
$150 a week
Okay.
they would receive if they were sick, which is it's called statutory sick pay. And for the working poor, you can't bring up your family on that. So people with COVID symptoms were carrying on going to work because the sickness pay wasn't enough, and it was one of the key drivers of early transmission and the increase in numbers.
That's
If you
what.
were on a good job on a furlough, it was great. If you were one of these working poor, the system failed you.
Yeah, that's what's happened here. People are even lying about whether or not they've tested positive because they
Yes.
don't want to not have a job, and they're infecting everybody. So they're making choices. If I kill all of you, I feel bad, but if I can feed my family, I'll feel good about that. Yeah, horrible choices to try to have to make, in this area. So, what over there happened with Black Lives Matter?
Well, I mean, it's a similar kind of evolution from what happened in. I mean, not similar, but it was a reaction to the George Floyd murder. But it kind of transpired in a very different way. And also, I think the nature of racism in the UK is very different. It has different histories. It doesn't. It's removed a bit, from the direct history of the United States of slavery. Although people did suffer, from racism, but in a different kind of way. There was a lot of post-colonial history, um, and slave owners that basically profited, and then established big cities, and then they were also made heroes. I think those are the types of kind of reactions that came out. It's things, grievances that had been going on for decades and not been addressed, and all of this kind of came to the fore,
So
in
are
the
they
UK.
addressing them better now?
I doubt it. I mean, in the sense that there's still this kind of racism within the police force, and kind of racial profiling, and subtle discrimination at work. I mean, it's still very pervasive, but at least, I mean, it was acknowledged. Let's say that, but I'm not sure that the momentum has kept up where the changes
No,
are taking
I
place.
I would add to that as well that one of the differences, in that it was much less partisan, that the opposition to Black Lives Matter was much more muted. And for instance, in the English football, in what you call soccer, the National Soccer League, every single player takes the knee on every single game. And if a player didn't take the knee for the minute beforehand, that would be news. And it's not controversial. There's no threats. So there is a different in emphasis, and social acceptability, if you like. It's not a matter of those against and those for. My understanding in the States is much more divisive.
And the United States has the memory of, I'm trying to think of which animal lives a short amount of time, maybe a tick. Um, if it happened yesterday, that's having a long memory. So for protests that happened in May, one of the things is they've had a kind of spiraling effect where people are reviewing policies and seem to be on the surface a little bit more sensitive. But much like the Me Too movement, it got all of this press, splash, bang, and then people are back to doing whatever it was they were doing before. So I don't know how long or how much. I want to take another quick break, and I want to come back and for you to tell me how the Muslims in the UK are doing. We had a fundraiser here, and one of the things that was talked about was the fact that Muslim media in the UK is a lot better than it is here in the United States, where there's the perception of Muslims having a lot more money. This is Muslim Network TV. This is Critical Talk with Professor Amin Al-Din, and I'm speaking with Ruby Khan and Andy. And please feel free to have your tea, your water. I know you're up late, and we certainly appreciate it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Excuse me. Muslim Network TV, Critical Talk with Ruby Khan and Andy Reid. And we're talking a little bit about the UK. But I want to, before I go to my questions about the Muslims there, we have a question from our audience that I would like to post. And go for it.
Well, I think people were relieved, to be honest. As we had talked about just a little bit before the broadcast, the whole process of the election and kind of how long it had been going on for really led to a lot of anxiety in the UK. And so I think there was just a sigh of relief when Biden and Kamala Harris won. So I think there's been quite a bit of damage done, but I think it's reparable. I'm very optimistic that things can be normalized, but it's definitely going to take 6 to 8 months probably for that.
What kind of damage? What do you mean by damage?
Well, America's in some ways seen as lead on key issues such as the environment or, it's one of UK's biggest allies. Also has excellent relations with the EU, and I think that all of those things have been quite damaged in terms of in the last few years. So,
wow.
Trump will also be missed.
Huh?
He will be missed by many, not because he's liked, because he's wonderful car crash TV. I think so. There's that level of entertainment and about, oh, it couldn't happen here. Let's laugh at America. So there is an element of that. I'm afraid, but
we too thought it couldn't happen here, and then we watched it unfolding, and I think the previous kind of occupation rolled into the presidency with the reality TV stuff, where you dominated all of the news 24/7. And so news that we should have been getting, we couldn't get. Because every time you looked up, you saw the orange hair and you said, okay, let me go find Netflix or something else to watch. But it was very, very interesting. And the politics that have been revealed uh, by this unusual presidency, not the most unusual in the history of the US, but now, with its nastiness, its vulgarities, unique. It's been special. But how are the Muslims doing over there in the UK? How is it that they have better media than the folks here?
well, the answer to your first question is it's been a bit mixed. Muslims, a lot of them work in the kind of the front line in terms of the response to COVID. So they've also been a lot of the gig economy workers, and so they've been quite exposed. And so many of them have continued. They didn't have the luxury of staying home to work in front of a computer. They had to be out there. So in many cases, you'll see that there have been a lot of Muslims that have been affected by the sickness. Unfortunately, there's many have died. So I think they've been really kind of disproportionately affected. In terms of media, I think they have access through the system that is the UK education system, and I think that they've been afforded things. A lot of it is based on performance. Some of it's based on poverty. In terms of people who would be eligible for scholarships, and they get access to some of the best schools because of that. Kind of their their performance and their ability to score well on the scores. So
So the infrastructure for media is very different there than it is here.
yes, and I think it's based on education as well. Because of the nationalized system and the ability to kind of work through the system and be able to access Oxford and Cambridge.
Mm-hmm.
It's provided them access to be on TV, on radio, and to experiences that perhaps in other places are not as accessible, let's say.
Wow. Well, one of the things that is coming up increasingly here in the U.S. Uh, are all of the issues regarding social services. As Ruby knows, Andy, you not so much, we have a welfare system that was really, its history is one of coming out of World War II, women with children who lost their husbands in the war, and it morphed to you have a kid and you can go get on welfare. Well, recently, and I don't remember how many years ago, but a few, it became if you want to receive welfare dollars, then you must work an appreciable amount of time, and you must be able to prove that you're working. And single men no longer were eligible for welfare. How does welfare and social, how do they work over there?
That's a tough question. The easy bit is to mention that the working poor, if you like, got a lot of tax breaks 10, 15 years ago under a couple of successive governments. So you could be working and not earning much and still in receipt of benefit. More recently, since austerity bit after the crash, it's become much harder, and there are people falling through the cracks. We have more food banks than we ever had. We had hardly any food banks 10 years ago. They're a growing phenomenon. The benefit system is very poor for people in the gig economy. So they're working for Uber one week and they make money. They're earning nothing the next week, and the welfare system can't cope for them.
Right.
So if you're a single mum, well established with nothing changing, you're still well looked after. Or a disabled man, if you're that kind of working, flexible, unsafe worker, you're in quite a lot of trouble. The system's not keeping up with you.
Wow. So it's kind of the same thing.
I suspect it's the same, but not quite, not doing quite so badly.
Yeah.
My suspicion.
So what do you think? Just sitting back and thinking philosophically, what is going on? Is there a need to get rid of some of the poor people? I mean, have the poor, uneducated, unemployed just become too much for many societies to handle? Not including, but including immigrants who can't work, don't speak the language, become immediate almost recipients of some kind of state something. What does that mean?
They work two jobs because they can't get benefits. They work two jobs and keep our houses clean and keep our streets clean and do the dirty jobs no one else wants.
Even if they don't speak English?
We can get them still cleaning an office block at 3 o'clock in the morning for below minimum wage.
You can hire somebody below minimum?
No, I'm not saying it's legal, but it happens.
Okay. So
they underpin a lot of the economy in London, where no one can afford to live on the salaries paid for those kind of jobs, unless 5 or 10 of you are sharing a room.
So, I mean, that happens here too. So London has never thought about getting cheaper, huh? To live in.
It's an expensive place if you want your own place. If you want your own house and you don't want to share with your colleagues.
What is the average cost of a two-bedroom apartment there?
It depends which side of town you are. In dollars, 450,000
450,000 what?
US for a two-bedroom
Oh,
apartment in
Dollars?
London.
Pennies?
Yes.
yes, yes.
To buy it? To buy it. Okay, I know who I'm just going to visit when all of this is over. Not going to stay long, so I start getting charged. But so what you're really paying for is, in many ways, an awesome healthcare system. An awesome, when it works, set of social services.
The healthcare system, I had to go abroad and not have a healthcare system to realize the security it gives you. Doesn't matter where you are, how sick you are, what's happened to you, you turn up, you get treated, it's free. There's no bills, there's no anything.
Oh, I wouldn't even know how to act. I got a stack sitting in front of me right now. Uh, and the thing that's funny is since COVID, people that work for the billing offices forget what they've already sent out. So they send you a bill, you call them and and they say, "Oh, we forgot to post that." Anyway, um, what is going on? No, how does the average person, because you two are not average, see the future there? Are the universities going to open again? Is it going to be things as usual here where everything you pay for, every single thing, you even pay to have rats and roaches, everything you pay for? And there's a worry because when universities and colleges closed, they lost students, right? And in order to keep their heads above water, no new professor, there are no new hires. They're using no new adjuncts. They are using a few to the limits of their ability. What's going on there with regard to schools and education? How do people see the future?
I mean, I think that the kids, there's a different system here, and many of the kids that have to take exams, they have to take exams in the with what we would call the 10th grade and the 12th grade to kind of get to their specialization and then eventually to university. And so children and young adults that have been in those years have basically missed out on that kind of rite of passage and process. And right now, in the UK, there are, as I said, there are a mix of tiers. And some places they're debating whether to close it down or not. So it's not been an even policy in terms of either education. Some universities are open and others, similar to the US, there have been
Close.
spikes in numbers and things like that. So and then professors are panicking, and there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of education. I think the hope is that once the vaccine is kind of well administered and things could get semi-normal, but it's basically how are you going to make up the year is the real question. How do you get back what you were supposed to do? So I think people need to kind of reckon with that in the next year.
That's a lot of the talk here. For example, Andy, you were a fisherman who went on to have some say in national and international uh, places. How does a kid who is 16 see that future today?
That there's a lot more concern. The universal free education at university has gone. They will now graduate with a lot of debt. They see a lot of unemployment. They see property that's now likely to be unaffordable unless they have money from their parents or from their grandparents to help them get on the ladder. And I think they're taking a much shorter term view of many things. I can afford a nice cup of coffee. I can afford this when I'm older, but I can't afford the big things. So it's giving them a much more short term outlook on life, I think.
Wow.
And I think the social mobility is actually going down, and a lot of people are accepting the fact that they're not going to have bright futures compared to people who are helped up the ladder a little bit by their backgrounds. So I think in a way we're regressing from what might be seen as the high point 15 or 20 years ago in terms of progressive culture. And certainly the response of a lot of people is, why bother getting myself into debt to get a qualification when I'm going to be working 2 jobs to pay it off? I might as well go and get a gig economy job now. So I would say there's quite a lot of worry and concern, coupled with the Brexit vote, which was overwhelmingly old people in favour of leaving and young people in favour of remaining, with the youngsters thinking we're inheriting the shit show, if I can use that word, sorry, that the generation above us is inflicted on us. So
So,
there's quite a lot of pessimism.
do you think that there's going to be some 11th hour resistance on the part of young people for what the doors that Brexit is, if it's successful, going to close?
I don't know how they'll resist or protest, and they have protested. And the Black Lives Matter was overwhelmingly young people, and was mixed with a whole lot of similar protest movement or protest ideas, if you like. How they'll resist it, I don't know. I think they're feeling powerless, and it's more like, how will we cope rather than how will we change it. That's a gross generalization, but that's my gut feeling.
Wow. Because I can see, you can almost feel it in the air here that there's not a lot of hope. This is, unlike most of Europe, this is not a saving society. This is a spending everything you got, and then when you run out, borrow society. Um, and people, young people, being trying to fight off the anxiety over what's happening with the university and colleges. Crime is off the charts. There are new kinds of crime here. And unlike UK, I don't know if they gave the cops in the UK guns or not, but over here, not only do the police have guns, they have military style stuff. They have tanks and they have grenades. And their newest weapon of choice is a drug used in the OR called ketamine, where you shoot it in somebody's jugular vein or in their arm, and they immediately the muscles are paralyzed. Um, so we have some responses, many not positive. Entrepreneurship here was off the charts pre-COVID. COVID came, and all of these little shops, most of which were boutique kinds of enterprises, immediately shut down. Did the same thing happen there?
Ruby?
So, sorry, could you repeat the last part of the
No,
question?
we've had um, the entrepreneurial kind of crazy spirit in the U.S. is one of where I want to sell funny house shoes. So let me go take out $100,000 worth of loans and open up a shop and sell funny house shoes. Those kinds of stores immediately closed their doors because they didn't have anything in savings. They hadn't been in operation long enough to have stuff in savings. Juvenile crime is off the chains here. Uh, Schools are still closed in many places. The young people have no place to go. There are not even any stores to hang on a corner in front of that are open. So they're hitting people over the head in the gas stations. They're home invasions. They are, the quarantine is going to bring a lot of crazy people out as they try to make sure they get a quarantine. I mean, they get a vaccine. So what is going on there? There has to be some response to the anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's been a real short-sightedness on the part of the government, and not doing enough to assure people that things will be okay, and then there's an end in sight, and there's hope out there. I think it's just the messaging has been quite very mixed, and contributing to the anxiety, let's say. Um, I think with the UK, there's been just confusion on the tier system. People don't know what's going on. People have to call the media to ask them questions, and then they get expert on to answer the questions on how to proceed. So I think that there has to be, I think, both on the part of the UK and the US, there has to be some real kind of thought into the messaging and how you convey anything from public health messages to messages on education to all these policies. You really have to be reassuring the populace. Otherwise, I think that's what's been missing in this whole crisis, basically.
Well, as usual, this has been enlightening. I think I will call you all back after we get through part 56 of our election. And we see what nut does what when there's supposed to be a real transition of power, or if Trump is going to show up at the inauguration, or if the Republicans are going to do a dance in the nude. I'll come back and talk about when, or maybe the end of January, when one way or the other, this part will be over. I don't think Trump supporters will ever let it go. This is Professor Aman Al-Din for Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk with Ruby Khan and Andy Reid. And as usual, I can't thank you all enough for staying up and talking with us this evening. Please stay around. Thank you very